Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to She Emerged podcast. And this is a space where we do all things faith plus mental health. Yes, we are truly elated to have you join us on this evening. I'm Sophia, I'm your host, and with me today is Dr. Shirley. And I am over excited to just have you here, Dr. Shirley. And Dr. Shirley will introduce, the audience into what led her to this population she's working with. But before that, she will give you a brief bio of herself, Dr. Shirley.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And thank you for having me on the show. So, good evening, everyone. As Sophia already introduced me, my name is Dr. Shirley, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Florida. So, as far as with my background, I graduated from Nova Southeastern University, and I have a master's and doctorate degree in couples and family therapy. And so at this present moment, I currently work at a facility where we serve the population with developmental disabilities. So children between the ages of, newborns up until the age of 22 years old. And in this particular program, we do have the children either come to us on site for the weekend for like respite and other services. And we also have the children reside in our facility under like a foster care status. And so, with that, as far as what exactly led me to that particular population, um, there is such a big need in the community for these programs and these centers that cater to children with developmental disabilities, especially because in the present day and age, we have a lot of children and even adults that are being diagnosed with autism or other developmental disabilities. And so when I started, I began my journey there about 5.5 years ago. I started out in the respite program where we provide support on site to children, doing like structured enrichment activities. And we also provided support to the family. So, support groups, linking them to therapy and to services and things like that. And then eventually I transitioned into the emergency shelter department where the children actually reside in our facility at this time. So,
That is a mouthful. I am just so in awe of the incredible work that you are doing. And of course, you graduated from NSU. Go Sharks. Okay.
sure.
So, you've mentioned the respite program.
Mhm.
To our audience, could you highlight a little bit more of, perhaps this is the first time some are hearing about respite. Where is that? How can they access that service?
Yes, yes, of course. So, respite, basically think of the root of the word, which is rest.
Mm,
So this service is provided, at least here, like locally in Broward County and Fort Lauderdale. It's provided to any child that has a documented developmental disability. Um, if they have free respite hours that are allotted to them every single year. And
mhm.
so basically what that means is the program allows the parents to get a break and to get a rest. And they will drop their children off at the facility, and they have staff members that are trained either through behavioral interventions or perhaps they're teachers and this is like a part-time job and things like that. So they do have that background knowledge to facilitate the service. And so you can bring your child into the facility, and you'll have someone that has the training and the background clearance to like watch over the children. While you go, the parent or caregiver runs errands or spends time with their loved ones and things like that. And you kind of have that safety, knowing that your child is in a safe place. So
Mm.
this is not just specific to Broward County. This is the service. It's available throughout the United States. It's just through like various agencies and through insurance and things like that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So what is the qualification like for them to be able to?
Yeah, so if for our site in particular, I'll just speak about like our site.
Mhm.
The respite program is grant funded.
Oh.
So that means that they have to meet like a financial threshold.
Mhm.
They have to submit like certain documents, financial documents in order to qualify. And so there's various centers across Broward County here in South Florida that do have this respite service.
Mhm.
And the criteria is pretty much the same. However, if you go, let's say we have a listener, for example, from Texas or Nevada or something like that, that might not necessarily be in South Florida, but is looking for services for their child with a diagnosis of the developmental disability,
Mhm.
also contact the insurance company
Mhm.
and see if they can have like a respite, someone come into their home to provide
Mhm.
the respite services in the home as well. So the parents can get a break in case there's like a lack of transportation or anything like that. They can come in the home as well.
Okay. So if we have listeners, I know GL is saying, this is so interesting. Great topic. Thank you so much, GL. And we do appreciate you joining us on this evening. And if you have any questions, we will be taking questions from our listeners. You can go ahead and, you know, let us know if you have any questions in the chat. The chat is now open for Dr. Shirley to be able to respond to your question. Thank you so much. And so I know very often this, idea of parenting children with developmental disabilities, it's a hard and sensitive topic. So, for the most part, do you see a lot of parents accessing the service in terms of support group? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think from my experience, one of the hardest parts is for the parents or the caregivers receiving that initial diagnosis. I think it's just so much shock, a stage
Mhm.
of grief. And I think that throughout the child's life, a lot of the times I see parents saying, like, every time they miss that milestone or they're delayed, it's like the grief restarts in them again.
Mm,
And it's like that never ending like grief and loss and just a lot of emotions when it comes to parenting a child with a disability.
mhm,
And so I think sometimes for parents, I see a mix of some parents are open to the idea of support groups. Like
mhm,
they hear the diagnosis, they want to jump into action and just go ahead and take all the resources they can get. Because being a part of taking that action helps them to kind of feel in control a little bit of the
mhm,
situation
mhm,
where there's
mhm.
so much unknown. But
Absolutely.
I also see a lot of parents and caregivers having a difficult time like attending the support groups. So the support groups are basically they're different groups. It's like mother support groups, grandparents for grandparents who have their grandkids in custody and they have developmental disabilities. So they're themed differently, but they just talk about everything. Just, what it feels like to parent a child. They share resources. They, do life together.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that other half of like the parents and caregivers, um, you know, they might have the resource to be able to start the support group, but I think emotionally and psychologically and mentally they're not there yet. Um, and sometimes it's that feeling of when I attend the support group, um, it's like a part of me is admitting that this diagnosis has become a reality. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a scary thought for a lot of our parents and caregivers. So we just join them where they're at in this stage of life of parenting a child with a disability. And we always support them and we guide them until they feel ready, like to be a part of the support groups or even receive the services in general.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So, as you were, just describing that process, I thought about this semester, I'm actually teaching human growth and development. And so
Mhm.
we've come across the different developmental stages. And I'm wondering, from a therapeutic standpoint, again, this is not an alternative for therapeutic, information, but again, we are here just to share. So I'm wondering, as the child develops, do you see, difficulty, much more difficulty navigating each milestone developmentally? And what does that look like for you as a therapist?
Yeah, so with the children, a lot of the times what we see is that most of the population that we have is diagnosed with autism,
Mm-hmm,
but autism is something that cannot be diagnosed in utero. So
mm-hmm,
usually the diagnosis starts as, I want to say, as young as 2 years old, and then it progresses from there. um, the parents and caregivers do share that they noticed that their child was regressing. So, for example, crawling and then they stop crawling or not walking, or like those delayed milestones, like not babbling, not talking, not giving them eye contact,
mm-hmm,
um, crying like the entire night, walking on their tippy toes. So, a lot of those little like warning signs.
mm-hmm,
Now, once the child is officially diagnosed, which that can be very difficult as well because there's such a long wait list here in South Florida for these diagnostic services. So once the child is formally diagnosed, that does open up the door to a lot more services.
mm-hmm,
So for example, like speech therapy to help them gain like a functional form of communication. They can have physical therapy, they can have occupational, so learning how to brush your teeth, how to eat, and things like that. Behavioral therapy as well. And then as when it comes to more of like the therapeutic, like talk therapy and things like that, a lot of the work is done in conjunction with the parent or the caregiver. So I think that when we pour into the parents and the caregivers that have these children with these disabilities, they can then pour into those children as well. So I think
mm-hmm,
like at least in like the therapies, even like talk therapy, it's all like the parent and the child like together. That's a very important aspect of any type of therapy that's done.
mm-hmm. So you are also punctuating from a systemic point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Dealing with the family system, even dealing with like all the providers, um, it's a lot. It's
Mhm,
definitely a lot. So I always emphasize like how important it is for the parents and the caregivers to pour into themselves. um, they might feel like, I don't have time or I have so much going on or things like that. But when they don't pour into themselves, they can't pour into the children, all the work that comes with having a child with a diagnosis, which is
mhm.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I also hear is a lot of self-care.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, a lot of self-care, a lot of mindfulness. Any
Mm-hmm.
and it's very subjective to like the family, the family culture. What they find is like what is self-care for them. So that could be building a sense of community around
Yes,
you.
yes.
Sometimes because of like cultural norms, there's a lot of a shame due to the
Mm,
diagnosis, a lot of isolation.
the
So
stigma.
the
Wow.
stigma, yes, definitely the stigma, especially South Florida. We're so densely like Caribbean community. So breaking that stigma
Mm-hmm.
and really building a community, whether it's like faith community or neighbors or even other parents at like the therapy centers, like anybody to join you like throughout the journey is, I think it's super important.
Absolutely. So I love the idea that you mentioned the faith community. Do you see a lot of that taking place in terms of the faith community?
Yes, I do. A lot of our clients are very heavily involved in like with the faith community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to be mindful and say like this can sometimes be like a double-edged sword. So we have had conversation with clients where, let's say, for example, um, their child might require medication, or the doctor says, you need medication, and the parent might say, "I'm going to pray it away," or it's not like
Mm,
the kind of like the denial. So I think
yeah.
really respecting their viewpoints, and how can we come to like a middle ground, or how can we make peace, or how can we make like come to a middle ground or an agreement as to where your beliefs are respected, but you're also respecting like maybe what the doctor is recommending for your child.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely do see a lot of parents and caregivers that have like a faith-based community that is there for them and uplifts them.
Mm-hmm. And so I love the fact that you made mention about having your faith, but also being mindful that this is, something that is very beneficial to get the help that you need. And, this idea of two things can be true, where
Mhm.
you can have your faith and you can still take that medication and it's okay. God is not mad at you, right?
Yeah, duality. It's okay to have for there to be a duality in that.
Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of I always say like it's so important to build that rapport with
Mm,
your the client, the family, the caregiver, because that rapport is like you're building the trust and the connection with
yes.
them. And you're really coming down and meeting them at that level where they're at, and you're not expecting them to jump 20 steps ahead.
Mhm,
I'm going to guide you through this. I'm going to give you psychoeducation. I want to open up the floor and see what you think. And just really being there for them and comprehending. It's scary. There's a lot of things being thrown at them all at
mhm,
once. So just
mhm,
having that patience and that love and that compassion to kind of guide them through is so important.
mhm. Wow. So it's something heavy that they're dealing with. And at the same time, I also hear, having that compassion as well. Tell me a little bit about that compassion. What got you started working with the population as
Yeah.
delve into this some more? Um, there was a mention of you, graduating from Nova. Was it in the master's program or in your doctorate program?
That I started at my agency. So I actually started a couple months after I graduated from my master's program. So this was towards the end of 2018.
Oh.
And for my master's internship, I worked with children. They did not have a disability, but they had mental health diagnoses through an alternative school. And
Oh.
so I got a lot of exposure to that population and like what their needs were. And
Mhm.
so afterwards, I saw an opportunity come up for working with children with developmental disabilities. And I will be very, transparent. I
Absolutely.
was very scared. I was very scared. I had
Let's
never,
normalize that.
yes, a lot. I never worked with children with disabilities,
Yeah.
like as far as developmental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw this opportunity, and I told myself that I wanted the challenge and I wanted to really submerge myself in this particular population.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very glad I did, because there's those children are just, they're my life. They're just, it's just no other way to describe it. It I think that the children have taught me so much about myself. They're so intuitive. It's just it's just so special to be able to serve them like in the capacity that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had like different roles throughout the agency, but now I'm settled into children in the emergency shelter that reside with us on site. So, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been magical. A lot of learning, a lot of ups and downs. But definitely, I couldn't be any happier.
Yeah.
Um,
So quite often you will hear about the regression. What does that look like when that milestone is not achieved? Again, we're looking at the lifespan. So if it's not achieved, as the parents anticipated.
yes. Yes, definitely. So, obviously, parents, caregivers know when you go take your child to the doctor every couple months, then every year, they'll have like that chart where it's like
Yes.
at age 2, you should be doing this and that.
Mhm.
So, as I was mentioning earlier, there for parents and caregivers of children with developmental disabilities, there's a lot of that grieving process that happens every time that milestone is not met.
Mhm.
And so, what what tends to happen, or at least what I see a lot, like on our site, is most of the children are nonverbal. And
Oh.
so, to wait till they're 4, 5, 6, and
Mhm.
like they're not saying anything, we typically recommend that the earlier you start with services, the better it's going to be for the child. And
Intervention.
so,
Oh.
yeah, so interventions could look, for example, like a child that doesn't speak,
Mhm.
getting them into speech therapy very early on, and then recognizing that their functional form of communication might not be through vocal words. It might be through a augmented communication device, or it
Mhm.
might be through pictures or signs. So just kind of staying open to that.
Mhm.
And also, for example, children that have difficulty like transitioning from maybe one activity to another, something like
Mhm.
that, like occupational therapy.
Yeah.
So every stage that there might be some regression happens if, for example, let's say the child is enrolled in speech therapy
Right.
or therapies.
Mhm.
Something I noticed was when the COVID-19 pandemic took place, we saw a lot of regression in the children because the services there, they kind of stopped, and you can't really do
I
virtual
see.
with these children.
Yes.
So there
No
was
hands
a lot
on.
there was a lot of regression there, and now
Mhm.
it's kind of like making up for that lost time. And
Yeah.
so that is also like added stressors like on the parents. So um I think it's important to keep those services structured and in place,
Mhm.
because usually children that are diagnosed with, for example, autism, they benefit from that structure, that stability, and that routine. So
Mhm.
keeping that in place will avoid regression in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah. And typically, are you seeing family, more single family or couples? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in the population of children with developmental disabilities, the divorce rate is actually much higher than the national average,
Mm.
and that's because you know the parents are navigating this disability, and they might be at different stages of acceptance or denial.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of not being on the same page, a lot of
Mhm.
disappointment. It's a lot of stress that's put on a marriage. So
Mhm.
we typically see a lot more, unfortunately, like
Mhm.
single parents, and then we also have quite a few grandparents that obtain custody of their grandchildren with developmental disabilities.
Mhm.
So navigating that complexity of being at an age where you're retired and then the
Mhm.
ball got thrown at you. So we definitely see that. I think that's really what we see the most is
Mhm.
single parents, and then typically we see grandparents with custody of their grandchildren.
So at that stage where, for the most part, grandparents are retired, traveling, and just living their best lives, right?
Yeah, yeah, as they should.
Oh wow, I can just imagine. So,
Mhm.
how are you now able to? Do they feel as if they are, like you said, thrown into the mix of things, or there are no
Yeah,
other support system?
it really goes case by case.
Oh,
I honestly think from what I've seen over the years, most of them got
mhm.
thrown into this dynamic,
Oh,
and it can be very challenging for them because
mhm.
most of, let's say they live in like a 55 and older community or something like that, most of their
That,
peers are
yeah,
not, they're not taking
yeah.
care of their grandkids. They're
Mhm,
traveling, like you mentioned, having
mhm.
fun, relaxing. So it can definitely, that's another stage of grief for them.
Mm,
um, they had to experience that grief when their grandchild was diagnosed years ago, and
mhm.
then they experience that grief now, having custody of the child, and then some of them are, maybe ill, might not have a lot of support systems. So we try to really support them. We do have a specialized grandparent support group
Oh, nice.
that connects them with like peers, and
Mhm,
they can kind of exchange resources and things like that, but it's definitely very difficult at that age.
mhm. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So I could not help but wonder, how do you take care of yourself? Holding space for, all these families and,
Great question. So I will say, I am very, very fortunate to have such a strong team of leaders at my agency that they really support us and navigate. Like, there's a lot of support in place, so we don't
Mhm,
feel burned out. But as for me, outside of work, I love to watch TV. I like to
mhm,
relax on the couch. I do a lot of like faith-based meditation, go to church, and I obviously relying on family and my
mhm.
friends to carry me through all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So then self-care for you is very much, necessary.
Yes, it really is. It's a must when you're working with, children with developmental disabilities. Definitely, if you preaching to the parents and caregivers that they have to pour into themselves in order
Mhm,
to pour into the children, you have to be, practicing what you preach as well.
mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So outside of you working with, this very much important population, you mentioned faith. Are there
Mhm.
other things that you are a part of in the faith community as well to
Not
raise awareness or?
Not at the moment because I just
Mhm.
graduated, so I'm still trying to like find like what life is after graduation, but
Yeah.
definitely involved in the faith community.
Uh-huh.
Some of the projects that I do have, or committees that I do want to get involved with, is
Mhm.
a specialized group for professionals like in the healthcare field or mental health field, that we go out in the community and like volunteer to
Mhm.
others. So that's definitely something on my to-do list.
Great.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the mission that you were a part of while you were a student at Nova.
Yeah, so as a student, I was when I served children that were at the alternative school. Um, so we provided solution focused brief therapy. It was a pretty brief, but we met with the children and we just really gave them a chance to be seen and be heard. uh,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you know, they might not be have that chance to be seen and be heard. So really getting down to the bottom of what's going on in their home environment, what
Mm-hmm.
the resources looking like, what's the community around them that it's uplifting, do they have that? So
Mm-hmm.
really getting to know those children. And a part of my time, I split it between that, and I also assisted as like an aide in the classroom, and just saw children with like a lot of behavioral challenges.
Mm-hmm.
They had a lot of big emotions and they didn't know how to outwardly express the emotions. So helping them identify what those emotions feel like in the body physiologically. You know, do we want to go for a walk? Do we want to talk to your parents? Like really helping, being person centered, solution oriented.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of what I did during my master's. Yeah, like a lot of the mission was pretty much uh, helping the children, like in that way.
Mm-hmm. And now that you have graduated, do you see yourself, having your own practice, perhaps?
So I do have that cooking in the works.
Okay.
Not anytime soon, but I do
Mhm.
think in the future that is something that I'm definitely interested in. Is really having more of like a faith-based agency that
Oh,
provides
nice.
services to the family system as a whole.
Mhm.
We're breaking up that family system, so like dads or moms or siblings and things like that. That's my long-term goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see yourself holding space for, a group, uh,
Yes.
you know, collaboration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love group work is very, very special. And it's so, how do I say, it's just so intimate. And building that bond and that connection with the members of the group, like the
Mhm.
mothers or, the caregivers. One of my goals is to make services more accessible for our Hispanic community that might
I
not,
love that.
yeah, that might not speak like English.
Yes.
So doing everything in Spanish.
Mhm.
In our agency, we come across a lot of families that get discriminated because of the
Yeah.
language barrier. So
Mhm.
making sure all the materials in Spanish, everything
Mhm.
in Spanish. So I think opening up that avenue more.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was very much interested in how do you give back to your own community, your culture?
Yes,
You know what I mean? Like, how
yes.
do you bring it in?
Yes, yes, that's definitely. I have like a little. I'm just taking a couple months break, but
Okay.
once I recuperate,
Yeah.
I'm back to like I think for me the most important part of really obtaining this degree and what I do is
Mhm.
service before self. So service
Yes.
to the
Oh, I
community.
love that. Service
Um,
before self.
yeah, it's just really at the end of the day, I personally think it's not about me. It's all about
Mhm.
the Lord helping me doing His good work, but
Mhm.
it's really serving the community, putting them first, and like what kind of needs are there in the community and how we can
Mhm.
fill in that gap. I'm really interested in like the local community and how we can
Mhm.
uplift and support them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I hear all great things giving back, to the community, being able to, bridge that gap to help those who are not able to access service and
Yeah.
to also debunk the myth of,
Mhm.
what's really happening. A lot of the awareness, the psychoeducation piece, I absolutely love as well. because coming alongside, the family emotional unit to be able to educate, the families about what is happening right now, so they too can have more, awareness. I think that's very important. And so, what would you say to someone, perhaps they're tuning in right now and they're not able to, ask a particular question? What would
Mhm.
you say to that family or individual to look, for in terms of working with children with developmental disabilities?
Definitely. So I would say just close your eyes and take a deep breath
Mhm,
before you jump into anything. I always like to tell my team 1 day at a time, and when the day is here, 1 hour at a time. And sometimes it's 1 minute at a time. That's all you
mhm,
really have the threshold for.
mhm,
So close your eyes, take a deep breath as many times as you have to during the day to keep going. As far as when it comes to resources, I think that doing basic Google searches, so for example, Autism Foundation or resources for autism or developmental disabilities,
mhm,
um, calling your health insurance is also a great option. Um, Not everybody qualifies for this, and I don't 100% have the list for the qualifiers, but sometimes you'll get access to like a designated case manager that
mm,
can kind of look up these resources for you, so you don't
mhm.
have to do all that work.
So
And
comprehensive care.
yes, exactly. And also,
Okay.
yeah, reaching out to your like local agency. So
Yeah.
maybe a quick Google search. There's a lot
Mhm,
of social worker, case managers that
mhm.
you might not have to spend hours on the phone or getting frustrated. You can collaborate with these social workers and case
I love
managers.
that word, collaboration.
Yeah, so you can find the
Yeah.
resources together and find out like what's gonna work best for you and your family. So definitely, I think researching all the resources, and I
Mhm,
will also say for anyone who's on Facebook, the Facebook groups are like they're amazing. So many resources. So you
mhm.
can search like parents of children with developmental disabilities or parents of, and then insert the diagnosis, and you'll find so many resources.
So the
So
buzzword, those are important. As
yes,
you're able to plug in those words, then
yes,
you'll be able to access those resources.
yes, correct. So kind of playing around with the words and doing a lot of research, but I will be honest to say that some states do have more research than, or sorry, resources than others,
Mhm,
and that's just because of government funding, which
mhm,
obviously that's a different topic of like advocacy and things like that. But
mhm.
definitely, I almost forgot 211. So dialing 211
Yes.
or 311, and then they're
Yeah.
24 hours a day. So telling them
Mhm,
everything that you need, and
mhm,
they're like a directory of resources 24 hours a day. So
mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Very good. So I like the fact that you are well-rounded, right?
Thank you.
Plethora of information and how they can access services. And one thing I admire is that you are very passionate about this population. And not only that, you want to be able to integrate all that your faith. So what I'm also seeing is wholeness, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I like that. I like that.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I really genuinely from the bottom of my heart I get to do something that I love every day.
Mhm,
I have such an amazing team. There's so much love and support, and
mhm.
I think honestly, the kids that come to our center are very lucky because we really love those kids. So it feels great to have so much support, just not only at work but outside of work as well. I think
Mhm.
that really
Yeah.
helps.
Work-life balance, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
how you're able
definitely.
to pivot doing all good things, right?
Yes,
For the
yes.
greater good.
Mhm.
I absolutely love that. So, if someone should come across this podcast, where can the people find you? What are your social handles?
Yeah, so my social handle is Sunnyside Up LMFT. So
Mhm,
you can definitely send me a direct message there.
mhm,
If in case you need anything or have a question about resources, I'll be more than happy to guide you or send you anything that you might need.
mhm. Beautiful.
Mhm.
So as we wrap up, are there any last, quotes, a message, anything that you would like to leave with our audience? But before we get to that, I am going to say, um, like one word, and you would tell me in terms of education, how would you describe that? So on
Mhm.
and so forth. So, education.
Mhm. How would I describe that, like in terms of the population?
Yes.
Whew,
Overall.
there, there's so much. How would I describe that? I think a lot of research, a lot of you might know one thing now, and then in 5 years it evolves and it gets updated and changed. So just being patient with the process,
Mhm.
and utilizing the resources that you have available to you to educate you, to guide you through the process. Um, but we're evolving, we're changing, things are changing. So, just being patient with the process. But that education is key.
Yeah, yeah.
It's key.
Family.
Yes, family is everything. Family is everything. Um, you mean in terms of like me or the
In
population?
general.
No, family is my anchor. I always go
Ooh.
back to that word anchor.
Mhm,
When you want to center yourself, I think that family helps you to anchor, ground yourself, and center yourself, and even like keep your mind like and your heart back on the mission.
mhm. All right, beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, again, Dr. Shirley, I am so delighted to, share this space with you.
Thank you.
For this episode, which I think it is a very important topic.
Mhm.
And you have shared not only eloquently but profoundly, and I believe that someone at some point will come across this podcast episode and find it very useful. So again, thank you so much, and I will leave your social handle in the show notes so that someone will be able to reach out to you if they need to. So thank you. Job well done. And again, congratulations. Okay.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
You're very welcome. Okay. And thanks to our audience for joining us in this community. Thank you so much. Great feedback. I love it all. And thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.